This message is brought to you by donotage.org, the longevity research organisation that's on a mission to extend health span for as many people as possible via products that actually work. Start your journey today at donotage.org and use code LLAMA for a 10% discount. That's LLAMA.
You're extracting the nectar out of life, like when you're getting up on a Monday morning at 5 o'clock and it's freezing cold and you go swim for an hour and at 7:30 you've swam, get a sauna, you're living life to its fullest.
Hello and welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast. I'm Peter Bowes. This is where we explore the science and stories behind human longevity. Now, I'm fascinated, and I know you are too because you're listening to this. I'm fascinated by the interventions that we can embrace to live a longer, healthier life. Why people become interested in their own longevity or potential health span. What influences our lifestyle choices? We all have our reasons. Well, my guest today is Joel Einhorn. Joel is an athlete. I think it's fair to say he's an extreme athlete, from skateboarding to Ironmans. In fact, it was while Joel was training in Prague for his second Ironman triathlon that something happened to change the course of his life. Joel is the founder of HANAH Life, a company which focuses on innovative ways to improve performance and our overall well-being. Joel, welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We'll get to that pivotal point in your life in a second, but let's talk about Joel, the kid, growing up. Where did you grow up and what kind of childhood did you have?
Grew up on the south side of Chicago, so in the suburbs. If you've ever been to Chicago, it's a very beautiful area, so sort of in the middle of the forest. And I grew up the quintessential Americana life. Grew up first, as soon as I could walk, throwing baseballs around and playing baseball, and then got pretty heavily into skateboarding as sort of the team sports. You end up sitting there throwing a ball against the wall when you don't have, I think it's 18 people needed to play a game of baseball. So got into skateboarding a little bit, also pretty heavily, though. All of these things I really dove very deep into. I had ramps in my backyard and things like that. And then, oddly enough, I got my father was playing golf, and I got absolutely addicted to playing golf at the age of 12. And so I was basically sort of skateboarding and playing golf, which kind of put me into two pretty unique groups of people, as you can imagine. And then just got absolutely hooked on golf and played and ended up going to college and playing golf there. And that was pretty much it.
At that time, it was the sport rather than the physical challenge that interested you, do you think?
Yeah, it was just playing, just being outside and playing was really the thing that I was after.
And did you think at that stage, did you aspire to be a professional sportsman?
I did, and then the minute that I was forced to do it beyond the point of pleasure, I realized that I wasn't cut out for that sort of singular focus in life. I liked doing too many different things, so I knew myself pretty well back then, and I knew that I didn't have what it took to just sit there and be singularly focused on one particular thing.
So at that stage, as a teenager, as a young lad growing up, what were your career aspirations?
Well, I actually, as I was an athlete as a kid, I randomly got thrown into the world of call it acting through my sister. My mom couldn't leave me home at the age of 10 while my sister was doing these auditions in fear that I would potentially burn the house down. So I would, be in my baseball gear and be going up to the city, which was about 30 miles away, to my sister's auditions. And one of the casting agents was, said, well, this dirty little, baseball player would be perfect. And I was really against it, ended up, getting involved in that. And I was sort of used as a the athlete. So if a commercial needed like a skateboarder or a baseball player, I ended up doing that and sort of got randomly thrown from suburban Chicago into the mix with all I was working with Johnny Galecki and Fred Savage, and these are very, very famous actors now, and just randomly got thrown into that. And actually, I really loved going. I was doing voiceovers as well, and I loved being in studios such as this one.
So you're feeling at home now?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
good.
And I just was really, I liked it. I wasn't into the whole, Hollywood thing, but I really liked the sound studio for some reason.
Is that because you're interested in technology?
Technology. I had a computer when I was in 1982 when the first Apple II came out. So we were like early adopters with that. We were some of the first people on the internet, with AOL and CompuServe and things like that. So I was definitely heavily into that whole tech world.
You just mentioned CompuServe. It just brings back memories instantly.
Yes.
Staring into a screen way smaller than the one that I'm looking at now, and just wishing it to work and just wishing it to get an internet connection. And it would drop off and it would drop off.
Yeah.
And we're going back to the 1980s now.
Oh, yeah.
But they were really exciting times, weren't they?
Yeah, we were just talking about it the other day. 1982, the Apple IIe came out, and they had the printer. They had a print shop, which was Apple's program for printing. You could print birthday cards and things like that. And then there was the games were Oregon Trail and Castle Wolfenstein were like the first two games. And so we were like sort of the early gamers. And I was also joking that I remember meeting the first computer geek back then when like our computer didn't work. And I was always asking the question, like, what were these people doing before computers? And I guess that goes back to like the blue box, the telephone thing where you could dial anywhere for free. But yeah, I was definitely interested in that whole tech world. But going to college, and this was no fault of my parents, and there was no, weird pressure or anything, but it was almost like, all right, it's either a doctor, lawyer, accountant, finance, there's no, liberal arts, there's none of that stuff. It was kind of like I was steered in that direction. So, no regrets or anything because I ended up getting a finance degree. I studied in Illinois, and then I went to the Wirtschaftsuniversität Vienna, the Vienna School of Economics. And all of that stuff is coming very handy. But, going back to the age of 16, if somebody would have sat me down and said, all right, like, what are your interests? I probably would have gone into, sound engineering or computer science or something like that, and my life would have been probably much different. But yeah, again, no regrets.
So many of us can say that. If you look back to those years, those teenage years, what your aspirations were then to how it actually turns out. In many, many cases, most cases, I think, it's dramatically different.
Yes, absolutely. But definitely having a business background and having studied that has led to a firm foundation for entrepreneurial endeavors in the future.
So how did you get into Ironmans?
So
that's kind of a step up, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm 43 now. So 96, 97, I was graduating from the school in Vienna, and got a job working in finance immediately. And then they sent me to Prague in 97, 98. And I worked for 18 months. We did the first private placement in the Czech Republic, which is a company that's now AVG Technologies, which actually my business partner took public very randomly. I did that. We did pretty well, and I realized that this was absolutely the last thing that I wanted to be doing, which was working in an office, working for somebody else. I was able to get the work done looking around my office in an hour and a half, what people were doing in the whole day. And that's right when the Nokia communicator sort of came out. I don't know if you remember that sort of brick phone that opened up. And I was like one of the first people that had linked. Faxing back then, it was all the deal memos had to be signed signature, but you could do that through fax. But you had to be in your office to have a fax machine. So I had rigged it up so I could do that on the fly. Email was coming into the phone, and I sort of went to my employers and said, look, I'd like to do something and expand this business. And they just weren't having it. And so after we had some initial success, I just decided to walk away and, start investing and to look into sort of other businesses that I would be interested in. And at the same time, just that affinity for being outside and playing was I missed that horribly. It's like sort of the kid looking out the window while everybody's playing, and you couldn't do that. So when I got out of that, I just decided, actually somebody told me a couple of years later, they're like, they handed me Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week book, the first time I'd ever seen it, and said, somebody wrote a book about your life. And it was just that thing where I was like, look, if I can do if I can figure out a way to do 40 hours of work in 10 hours a week, I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to have the other time to, do sports. And one thing I've always liked doing and still to this day like doing is testing myself and going out and doing something that I don't particularly want to do, but I'm interested in. So, for example, like surfing, I want to surf, but I know that the bar to entry is so hard. I want to speak another language. I want to speak Italian. So the only way to do that is to go to Italy and to learn it. And so I like that sort of breaking through those barriers. And so getting to the Ironman, the long way around. I had been doing a lot of snowboarding and a lot of hiking and then a lot of cycling. I had picked up cycling again. I obviously did that when I was a kid, but got a couple of ex-Czech professional cyclists got me a road bike and put me in spandex, and I was like, this is the last thing I ever want to do, but I'm going to do it because of that thing where it's like, if you have sort of an ego issue with it, try it once. So I did that, and I absolutely fell in love with road cycling. And these guys were professionals, so it was like riding in the peloton, riding in the group, and the drafting, and then learning the whole history of the sport and being in Europe. That just absolutely enthralled me. And one of the guys I was training with, when I did my first 180-kilometer bike race, and just feeling the effects of how I felt after that, he had done Ironman, and I'll never forget just thinking, wow, like it's a 4K swim, 180-kilometer bike ride, and then a marathon after. I was like, that sounds absolutely insane, like absolutely insane.
And we'll continue this conversation in just a moment.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we're the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
You take me back to the first time I started to train for my first marathon. And from someone who was a casual 2 or 3 mile runner to having that 26.2 miles in front of me. And this is in the UK. It's freezing cold. It's winter. The marathon's in London in February, March. Yeah, it wasn't fun. At least it didn't feel fun to start with, but then it grows on you.
Yeah.
It grows on you. And then you become addicted.
Yeah. And it's weird how I think once you break through that initial, whatever you want to call it, like a couple of months. So I decided to do the Ironman basically, and this was maybe 15 years ago. And so, I obviously knew how to swim, but, the first step before you can even start talking with a coach is make sure you can at least swim like 10 laps without stopping. And, I'll never forget, going to the pool alone and in the cold weather and swimming outside and not even being able to make it 50 meters without stopping. And then eventually after, 10 or 15 sessions, making it 600 meters and then figuring out a way to work together with people. And, just that whole thing of watching what the human body is capable of. And, again, that's when it becomes addictive and you start to feel that heightened sense of, like you're extracting the nectar out of life, like when you're getting up on a Monday morning at 5 o'clock and it's freezing cold and you go swim for an hour and it's 7:30. You've swam, you had a sauna, and you're just you're living life to its fullest. And I think that was the thing that really actually became quite an emotional thing going through that whole process of doing the Ironman, of just all of the dedication and how amazingly in touch you were with everything. As you know, as a runner, I would call it my office. If you go run from 6 until 7 in the morning, I mean, your day is in your mind is completely organized. It's completely sorted. You have a task list. These are the top 3 things I'm going to do. And on top of that, you feel amazing. So that is the thing that definitely became very addictive on the way to eventually doing these Ironmans.
And you remind me of the very recent episode we did with Dr. Zabma Zenifar, who's a doctor at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. He's 70 years old. He recently did his 100th marathon. He runs in the Santa Monica Mountains every morning, gets up 5:30. He's at his desk having done that run and seen the sunrise over Los Angeles, and he's at his desk by 7 a.m. It personifies the kind of culture that you're talking about.
Yeah, once you start doing that, it's really hard to go back, and in terms of, talking about, quality of life, it can go by very quickly. And so, trying to be present every day and being, grateful about the fact that you're healthy and that you even have the ability to walk around. And then on top of that, having these heightened experiences, it's one of the more beautiful things, we can experience, I think.
And just before I lose the thread of what you said a few moments ago about when you were when you were looking out of that window and wanting to be the kid or the grown-up outside, in the fresh air, in the mountains, on your bike, or whatever you were doing, and trying to maximize your efficiency with the technology that you had then to get all your stuff done inside the office. Is that still you today, that you run your life with that kind of military precision almost to get that stuff done that you've got to do so that you can really do the fun stuff?
Absolutely. And it never stops. It's from getting stuff ready. There's a million things, like from getting your day ready the night before, laying out your clothes, getting that all ready, having your, whatever you're going to eat or drink in the morning ready, having all of your systems, diving into your tech and making sure that your whole, your program on your computer is all dialed in terms of bookmarks and, Google Drives and calendars and getting all that synced. It's systems, as we know. You get a system in place and it literally it doesn't take much more time. But what it does is it saves everybody time around you, and especially yourself, forever, ad infinitum. Especially if you know how to use these programs. And nowadays you can just Google it. People ask me questions. Hey, how do I do that? You can literally just type the question into Google. If you want to learn how to use Adobe Illustrator in 3 hours, you can. It's so definitely there is definitely some military precision in there.
Yeah, I like it. And are you one of these guys, what you're going to wear the next day? You maybe have a limited wardrobe.
Absolutely.
So there's no thinking there?
There's no thinking. No, I have actually a shirt that we made with a friend's company called One Golden Thread, and he just made a shirt, and that's it. That's pretty much all I wear. It's very simple.
Save your brain for the fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me what happened. 2008. There was a big turning point in your life, wasn't there?
Yeah. So training in the middle of the Ironman training, already had done some races and was feeling really good. It was the end of the season, October in Prague, and you get those Indian summer days where it's just it's 70 degrees, the trees are changing, and it's like also you're in the shape of the season. You've got all those miles in your legs, and I can remember the day. I was a little bit ahead of myself. I was rushing. I was really anxious to get out there and get into the hills with my friends. They were out like 30 kilometers from Prague, and I was kind of racing through the day to get out there, and just a totally random accident, going a little bit quick, going about 40K, standing up on the pedals and taking a few risks. And there was this one area where there was a wall, and some women came out with prams with the key, and I just veered to the left, and there was a little crack in the pavement, and bike got stuck, and before I even recognized what was going on, and went straight over the bars without a helmet. I would probably say dead or eating through a straw. Helmet just shattered all over the place, and then my shoulder took the brunt of all of the weight, and the collarbone dislocated at the AC joint, which is the shoulder joint there, and it was sticking out of my back. So it completely, it went through the skin, and I remember kind of trying to push it back in really quickly in shock, going, "Oh, if I push it back, it'll just go back. It'll be fine." And I was only about 5 or 6K from Prague, and I actually just rode my bike back with one arm tucked into the jersey, and went home. I knew it was pretty bad. Went home, got a change of clothes, and the hospital's pretty close to my house, and went to the hospital.
In a lot of pain?
It was growing. It was one of those things where the pain was sort of rising. So I stopped at a restaurant on the way, got a big bag of ice, put it on my shoulder, went in, and the doctors were, you can really gauge the level of danger that you're in, or the risks that are there by kind of just watching the face of the when you go into the emergency room. If they say, hey, just sit down and wait, you can just kind of breathe a sigh of relief. But if they're like, look around and 5 people come and grab you, it's pretty bad. And I guess like a compound dislocation, the potential is for an infection, and if you get an infection sort of at that part of your body, it's real bad. Like you can die. So that was there. They put these really weird iodine plugs in my back and had me. They couldn't do the surgery immediately because of the swelling. And then we had the brain issue. I was dizzy, and I had a pretty bad, severe either concussion or TBI. But they weren't really even. That wasn't even talked about at all. It was really just sort of like, we got to make sure this doesn't get infected, and stayed in the hospital, had the surgery done. And the whole time in there, the food was absolutely atrocious. White bread, processed ham and cheese, and it was just, I had friends bringing me some stuff in there. And
why, in this day and age, do hospitals do this?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's just beyond belief, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, that you would hope and you would think that's where the knowledge is.
Yeah.
Yet you're fed all this.
Yeah,
horrible stuff.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
It is. But it's one that
shocking.
Intrigues me.
It's shocking. Absolutely shocking. And then they let me out of the hospital, and I went home, and I'm like, talking to them, and it's all in check, and my check is pretty good, but in terms of like talking about like neuroscience, it's not. It's pretty limited. And so they were just like, don't worry about it. Go home. You'll be fine. So went home, and I'm like, I got pins in my shoulder. Actually, I talked to somebody recently, and they said that the way, and I showed this woman, she's a surgeon that does these operations, and I guess now what they do is they take a bit from a cadaver, and they put it inside of your body, and they tie the collarbone down, and then it just stays there, which is like the newest way they do it. And she looked at the X-ray I showed her, and she goes, that's almost medieval, the way they did it. Well, I mean, we're in the Czech Republic. It's social medicine, and God bless the place. I mean, it's amazing. But they put wires in there, and these wires were going to have to be removed. They basically just put it back in place. And so, they're kind of poking the skin, so you really couldn't move. It wasn't like it was hard to lay down. It was hard to do anything. I mean, putting a sock on with one hand is pretty difficult. So I'm sitting there, and all the body wants to do, and this is after lots of research, after an injury like that, is you need to eat I think it's 7,000 calories a day, 7,500 of good healthy food, because your body is mining all of these minerals from other parts, leaching from the bones and things, and you want to sleep. And I couldn't close my eyes. I would close my eyes, and I would spin like a slot machine. And I was basically, in a very, very dark place, let's put it. It was, coming into winter in Prague, and didn't have a girlfriend at the time. And so, it was very dark, looking at potentially the end of life as you know it. You just don't know how that's all going to, work out. And a couple of days like that, went back to the doctor. They didn't have anything they could do. And I actually I did this meditation that somebody at that time wasn't really heavily into this type of stuff, but I was doing it. I mean, if you run, you meditate. You get into those zones, so you kind of understand how to access it.
Running, swimming.
Running, swimming.
You are in a state of meditation. Your mind is elsewhere.
Right. So it's not that it's that far-fetched. And I had run through this executive training course with a friend of mine, and he gave me this meditation, which was, you close your eyes. The universe will give you a teacher or a guide if you ask for it in a way that's, where you really need it and everybody's going to benefit, one of those things. So I did this meditation, and I kid you not, there was this Indian dhaba restaurant around the corner from my house that I would eat at once a day, which is a traditional Indian place where they make, dal, just like in India, like the restaurants in India, the dal and the beans, and they make one big, huge pot of it, and then you eat it, and then that's it. It's done for the day. And I went in there. It was the first time I'd actually been able to leave the house. And I went in there, and I was, cut up. And these guys had known me for years coming in there, and were like, man, what happened? bad bike crash, and I'm just wondering, I feel like I need some sort of intervention here, like an Eastern healer. That's just what my gut is telling me. The Western doctors aren't doing it, not cutting it. And he goes, oh, right over there in the corner is Dr. George. You might want to talk to him. And it was this 65-year-old Indian man sitting there eating his chapati and dal, and that was Dr. George Essay. And
was he a medical doctor?
He had a medical doctor degree. He had a Chinese medicine degree, and he was an Ayurvedic specialist. And at that time he was translating books out of lost languages, books on Ayurvedic texts and books on herbs and things like that, and just sitting in Prague and doing it from there. And he also had a practice where he would, work with people like myself. And long story short, we met. Next day, went to his place, and he gave me a whole list of herbs, and he had all the stuff there, and it was like medicated ghee and herbs, and I had to eat 3 cans of sardines every day, and all these different things. This whole like diet plan, and after a couple of days, he had basically said that according to Ayurveda, when this happens, it's like the fire, you've been shaken. The fire is heavy in the body, and you need to just like calm the body down and subside that flame. And within a couple of days, I was able to sleep, and I was on that whole program for 2.5 months. And 2.5 months after the accident, I had the pins out, and then a week later, I was back in the pool. And so 3 months to the day after the accident, I was back on the bike, I was back in the pool, and I was back running and feeling I couldn't believe how good I felt. And so basically what happened was, I was in the pool, and once I got, my arm, my chest opened up, I know my breath holds, and that's a very easy thing to do. You go underwater and you swim as far as you can. And at that time I was doing like 60, 70 meters on one breath, and I was doing like 90, 100. And so I just, it's a pretty good indicator as to how, your body's working with the oxygen and things like that. And, I went back to the doctor and I said, look, I actually just researched all of these herbs that have all these weird names like gotu-kola and ashwagandha that I'd never heard of. And I was expecting to see that they, their main benefits would have been, to heal, ruptured tendons and ligaments and, but it says, memory, focus, recall, stamina, endurance, blood picture. And my question to him was like, can I keep taking this stuff? Like, can I take it every day? And he goes, yes, of course you can, but where are you going to get it from? And I was like, look, I just Banyan Botanicals or this place, Ron Tea Garden. I researched and I can get it shipped over here. He's like, Joel, like you can't, you don't know where it's from. And that's that moment right there. Being somebody who's a little bit obsessive about these things really kind of spawned this whole journey of. So this stuff works. You can take it all the time. You don't have to just take it when you have like an injury or some sort of symptoms, but you need to get the best stuff, right? And if you look at something like wine, I think that's a perfect example where it's like, yeah, you plant Pinot Noir in Burgundy on this slope in this soil, and you're going to get something completely different than a Pinot in Arizona. Right. So it just led me down this path. I started going to India and sourcing all of these herbs and using them. And at that time, I was 32, 33, speaking a couple of languages, losing English actually, because you don't have conversations like this a lot when you're over in Europe. Right. And I just noticed that I'd started to take naps as well, especially a lot of training, and okay, I'm 33. I guess that's when you start to take naps,
Were you the kind of person who resisted taking a nap, or it just physically didn't occur to you?
It just happens, it just happened, naturally. All of a sudden at 2:00, you're like, wow, an hour of sleep would be amazing right now, which, I occasionally still do, but very, very rarely. And yeah, nothing against it. It's just that I just find that sometimes in life, if you're with a group of people and it's just, that's just what happens when you're 33. Oh, wait until you're 40. That's when things start. And so, all of these things, my life had been shaken up, like quite literally. then I had this, this new infusion of something to learn and something to go after, and started spending a lot of time in India and sourcing all of these herbs, bringing them back. I was still doing triathlons, and I had obviously always been eating very healthily, and but now adding this new sort of herbal things to the mix really sort of changed things up a lot.
And just to sort of going back to the early stages of you embracing Eastern medicine, this was at the same time as continuing to use Western medicine in terms of your recovery. You were intertwining both.
Complete integration, which is, thank God for Western medicine. I mean, like the fact that you can go into a hospital with a broken arm and, x-rays and blood tests, or, making sure you right blood type, this, that, that's amazing. And that, unfortunately for many reasons it stops there. Little things like, again, a broken arm. If you research it, when you have a broken arm, you should eat 7,000 calories a day, because your body, it's basically going into other parts of your body and mining things to fix the bone. No, I've never heard that from any doctor, and I've been around tons of athletes, tons of people that have had these issues. The type of food that you eat. That's why you see pro athletes, I think. You do see it, but they don't talk about it because they have their own little secrets. But you see pro athletes, hockey players, for example, will break their collarbone, and 4 weeks later they'll be back playing. 4 to 6 weeks later, full contact. And that's a third to a half of the time that they tell you when you go to a regular doctor. And that's just because they're addressing all of these other things. So yes, to answer your question, a merger between – I wouldn't even call it Eastern medicine. I would just call it sort of Western medicine and logic.
Right. So where did this take you? You kind of seen the light, and you'd proven that these methods could work because you were feeling so much better physically and mentally, I guess. You had been brought alive, I think. It's interpreting what you're saying. What did you do with this knowledge?
Well, so I started going back and forth to India and working with Dr. Venugopal, who is I started learning. Basically, it was a long, long process of, about 10 years of sitting down and learning, how India works and how to work in India. And, you can't just approach these people and call them with a Western mindset. You don't get these introductions. And so realizing that they were pretty sacred, relationships, bringing these herbs back to Prague. And another thing is, when you're training, as a couple hours a day, there are these, there's these goo gels. You can't eat a cheeseburger before you go run. You just can't do it. And so it's all about finding the foods. I was doing a lot of of hummus. That was my main go-to sort of thing. And then when you do these a 6-hour bike ride, there's a lot of ISO drinks and things like that are out there. But again, it doesn't feel right to me, to be putting these things in your body all the time. Of course, during a race, time of need, use them, but make it the exception and not the rule. And so I was always just sticking with water and liquid minerals. And then I started making these drinks with honey, just basically taking green tea, imagine a half liter or a 0.75 bidon, and just putting green tea at night, letting it cool down a little bit, putting half a bottle of honey in there. And then I would throw in 4 or 5 of these different herbs and just have that as my backup. So, when, you're not feeling well, you're bonking a little bit, you need some energy, just take a shot of that. And my friends were like, what the heck is this? What are you doing? What are you doing over there? Yeah. And so I just started doing that. And yeah, a couple of people were, started to become interested around. And then, I started working with Dr. Venugopal and creating, I was like, look, all of these supplements, all of these different things out there, I want to create one thing that would address these issues. And then we created that sort of algorithm of what are you looking to achieve? And let me go through, our books here. And, they very well cataloged Ayurvedic library there of all of the recipes. They have everything written down, and it's very sacred. And so we had come upon this recipe. They're called rasayanas in India. And also in Chinese medicine, they use something very similar where they'll take 30 different herbs and they will extract them in different ways. Some they will boil, Some they will crush into a powder. Some they will put into like a massive tea bag and then put that into the water and extract. And then they, once they have that boiled down, they'll put in honey, ghee, sesame oil, and raw sugarcane. And what that does is it creates a perfect absorption method for all of these herbs. And so actually, like in Chinese medicine, you can go to the doctor. Like the wealthy people go to the doctor and he'll do their whole, full body scan and test, and then he'll create a specific one of these products for them for the winter so they don't get sick or whatever. So there are many different, it's a almost infinite number of potential recipes that are possible, using the Rasayana method. And so we just plugged in the variables and we created something. So in Ayurveda, there's something called doshas. So everybody is Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. And we wanted to create something that would be able to be used by everybody all the time. And so that was sort of the idea. And when I started bringing these mixtures back and testing them over the course of a couple of years, I gave them to a couple of friends. And, next thing you know, it was like, hey, can I get like 10 jars of that? I want to give it to my grandma, to my mom and my mom's friends. And so I just started getting like 40-kilo jugs, huge jugs brought over. And just in my kitchen, I went to the local bake shop there in Prague and got some really nice jars and just started bottling it and giving it to friends. And wasn't really thinking about turning it into a business. It was more of just like, I really like to have this stuff around. And it's pretty cool that all of my friends are having access to it too. And just to sort of, I was so deep in, just getting that stuff sent over to Prague that I hadn't really thought about it. And so J.R. Smith, who's now my main business partner, he had just exited AVG, the tech company, and taken it public. And he, basically came to me, and I was also going through a little bit of an existential crisis. I had a couple of businesses, and just one of those things where it wasn't fulfilling me to the point where I felt like I was doing
his heart wasn't in it.
That wasn't it. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And he knew that. He's one of my closest friends, and he saw what I was doing and was like, this is what you should be doing. This is exactly who you are. I do a lot of fasting. I share all my info with all my friends. I try to be a good example for them, and that's just, really how it happened. He's like, look, we sat down, we had a hard discussion, as you do if you're going to enter into which I think is very appropriate, if you're going to enter into business with somebody.
It's vital and important. Yeah, absolutely.
And we had a good, firm conversation, and we're like, all right, do you want to do this? Yeah. He's like, you've got, one half of it. I've got the other half, and let's sit down and I'll share my knowledge with you, and then you share yours here, and let's build a brand. And, we've got some bigger things that we want to do, and so this is sort of the first stage in, achieving that. Interesting.
I just want to go off at a small tangent because we've talked about fasting a lot on this podcast, but you mentioned fasting. What kind of fasting do you do?
So I actually started doing it with JR about 20 years ago. There was a website called fasting.com, and this was all about juice fasting. So it's juice fasting with, colonic and enema and all that type of stuff. And I remember doing it the first time. JR had actually done like a 90-day fast, and I was just blown away by that. And I met another guy.
Which is pretty extreme.
It's pretty extreme, juicing, and I had met another guy in Prague, and I remember asking him how old he was, and he told me, like, I was thinking 27, 28. He told me like 46. What's your secret fasting? So I think at first it came to me as a something that's going to keep you younger looking, and so I think it was the sort of that side of it, and just healthier in general. And so got into the juice fasting and did 7-day the first time, and it was. All of that stuff is way pushed aside. It's sort of like the best I've ever felt in my life, and definitely I would consider that like the fountain of youth for me.
And just to be specific, when you say a juice fast, what does that entail?
So the way we were doing it, real simple: 2 days of fruit and vegetable, raw, all the water, herbal tea, and then let's say 4 days of green juice and broth. Vegetable broth, no salt, just completely full ketosis. And, you minimize all of that so you're not like, drinking a gallon of juice at a time, which is sometimes what you want to do. And getting into that state of like clicking over into the point of, ketosis, you're not hungry at all. And you just really go into very deep spiritual, regenerative place.
Because the first impression, of course, when anyone hears that you're consuming a lot of juice, equates to a lot of sugar, which isn't going to put you into ketosis.
Right. Yeah. So that's why we were sticking with specific types of juices and
Right.
green juices and things like that. So staying, in that space. You can, and actually, when you're in that space, you can totally tell when you get out of it.
You can feel it.
Yeah, you can feel it. So staying in those areas and doing that, and then that transitioned into longer ones, 28-day fast, like with water fasting inside of that. And so I now I do a combination of the panchakarma treatments in India, which is something a little bit different than that.
What does that involve?
The panchakarma is ancient sort of Indian way of treating certain things, and so you can go in there with if you've had a broken arm or if you have an injury, but you can also go in there in a preventative way. And so there's different types of massages that they do with. You go there, it's usually like 100 degrees. It's the best time to do it. So you're sweating all the time. Medicated oils over your whole body. They do the Shirodhara, which is oil over the forehead. They call that resetting the hard drive. All different types of things for I usually just go with the massages, and then some sauna stuff that they do where they just put your body with your head sticking out of the sauna. They do all kinds of stuff, but mine is mainly for just detoxification. And you wake up in the one morning at 5 a.m. They give you this laxative, like a top-down sort of enema, and then they just basically strip you down to almost nothing, and then rebuild you back up,
which is essentially what fasting does. It's not so much the fasting, it's the recovery from the fasting, it's the regrowth, it's the generation of new white blood cells, it's the renewing of your immune system and all that good stuff. So it's whenever I fasted, it's the, let's say, 10 days afterwards that you feel good during the fast once you've got into ketosis, but then the recovery process, the recovery side of fasting is when I feel really good. Yeah.
And it really trains your mind. We were actually, JR is fasting right now, and we were talking about how it resets your body to, let's say you're on an airplane and you don't want to eat that food. You know that you can, all right, I'm just going to drink water. You know that you can handle that. But also it you get feeling so good all the way through your body that, you just look at like, okay, I can take a salad and some hummus, or I can have that cheeseburger, and literally it resets you to the point where you look at that cheeseburger and, hey, no offense to cheeseburgers, I love them. But you just be like, I know, I don't want to do that right now, because if I eat that, it's going to just hit pause on everything, So it's a huge reprogramming, and I think that from that point of view, there's many ways you can look at it, but just that whole breaking the cycle of the habits that we have, that we fall back into, where it's like, I'm in a creative mode. I'm output. Oh, I'm hungry. Okay, let's stop it. And then, it's like you're procrastinating basically sometimes. So I think it's great to use fasting to break habits as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I should just say, and I always say, that the fasting isn't for everyone, and there are medical reasons why some people shouldn't fast. And if you're listening to this and thinking about fasting, talk to your doctor first.
Absolutely. It's very dangerous to do alone.
It is, yeah. It's dangerous to do alone, and dangerous to do, we don't know everyone's condition, and so it's dangerous to do without any kind of formal monitoring and medical advice.
Absolutely.
It's pretty basic, but it's the best thing to do. So let's talk about HANAH. HANAH really is the result of what's happened to you in the last couple of decades.
Yes, yeah, it is. So after that, JR, like I said, JR and I had the conversation, and we, I've built a couple of companies, some successfully, some not so much. And just learning, he'd been doing a lot of work in Silicon Valley and in that whole world, and just had a lot of knowledge to pass on, and, just doing things like, the brand vision, 3-day, immersive sort of sessions with him, and, creating the name and the product, like looking at how we're going to build the products, and because I have like 50 things I want to bring out, but you got to stick, you got to kind of focus, and
you got to pace yourself.
Yeah, you got to pace yourself, and so just and figuring all that stuff out, how many times, usually in companies, you're a year into it and you're like, oh, geez, we got to change the colors or we need to change the name. And so like that's just something you want to avoid at all costs. And so we did that at first and then, started seeding the product, giving it out to our network and getting feedback and doing surveys, which I think actually is better than doing focus groups, and getting good, honest feedback from our friends and family, and then just started going from there and started giving it to a lot of friends that were also that are professional athletes. And the feedback that I was getting from the athletes was pretty amazing. It's also interesting that, I think 15 years ago, especially, like snowboarders and skiers and skateboarders and surfers and even climbers, it was like kind of cool not to eat so healthy. And then, there was just that moment where it kind of clicked over where you'd have these super professionals, guys like Travis Rice or Shaun White even, that were like, hey, like I don't want to become a derelict, drug addict at 30 that's, talking about the good old days. I want to keep going. And this is possible to do for a long time. And so I think that we kind of converged in that moment with a lot of athletes where and as you know now, it's very prominent, where athletes and actors and high functioning humans a lot of times are being interviewed about, what they're doing to stay healthy. And so, just started naturally sort of integrating with a lot of these guys and diving in and then getting a chance to see, behind the curtain and just being blown away by, guys like Travis Rice who do, an yoga every morning and meditate.
Travis is the snowboarder.
Or Jimmy Chin, who's, brings half of his suitcase as like a yoga mat and rolling out and meditating half an hour a day and, doing all these things just because that's the only way you can possibly do what they do, which is not only be an athlete, but be a businessman at the same time.
Well, look, I wish you the best of luck with it. It's an exciting time, I think, for you, and just building on all of your own personal experience. Let me ask you this in closing, and it's the question I ask most people. In terms of your own longevity, your own health span, let's not focus on lifespan, but your own health span. And clearly we share so many, I think, aspirations in terms of optimizing our time right now so that you can do what you want to do. But looking long term, what are your own personal aspirations?
To simplify the way in which our global community interacts with food and supplements on a very big scale would be something that I would really like to do, bridging this gap between like what is called Eastern and Western medicine. Would love to create a center. Imagine a place where you could just go check into for whatever 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks somewhere beautiful, and just go and all of the crazy amazing stuff, the people that you're talking to it's all there. It's all there. You could do all the run the gamut. Everything's going to become much cheaper in the next couple of years, and continue to do things like surfing. I just started surfing a couple of years ago, and it's just been picking more low impact. Yeah, you can get hurt surfing, but if you choose your places, doing stuff like that. Continue to cycle. I love cycling. I've been cycling all summer in Europe, and just some kids potentially.
It's funny, nearly everyone mentions children as a reason to live long and healthy, to still be around for the children. Yeah,
absolutely. And just like you said, that health span. I want to live a long, full life. Lead by example, and hang out with my friends and do amazing things.
And do you notice, I certainly do, that in the space that you're working in, and both of us to an extent, that this is beginning to resonate with more and more people, that the concept of health span and the interventions that we can apply to ourselves that are clearly going to benefit that longevity?
Yeah, it's happening slowly. I think right now there's a need for for concentration. Right now, I think there's a lot of stuff out there, and I think that's the decision fatigue. Like when I talked about simplifying this for people, there is decision fatigue out there right now. Where can you imagine, housewife, 28 years old in Minnesota that decides she wants to get healthy walks into the supplement aisle, it's like her head's going to explode. So
and I think that's a huge problem. It is the confusion that ultimately actually puts people off.
Absolutely.
And they feel that, well, I can't try everything. I can't try that and that intervention or that supplement with this exercise regime. It's just too mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yes. And also, I've had, luckily enough, I've had experiences with things that actually work. And so there's a big problem right now in the industry with basically products that are using not the purest ingredients. Let's say that. And so that's a big thing that needs to be solved, because like the placebo effect obviously works, but that, when somebody goes in, somebody that has some issue and they should be taking these 3 things, and they go to Tesco to buy them and they're getting orange sawdust, that is not a good thing. So, that's something that we're very passionate about in the industry is the purity and the quality and the results of these things, and sort of creating a way to enable people to understand, where these things are coming from. And at the same time, when you know where they're coming from, that will then ensure that these places continue to exist. So, for example, the reason why a Burgundy is so sacred is because people know it exists and people understand and they can feel it and taste it, and it's protected. But unfortunately, in the supplement industry, you don't taste. There is no difference in most people can't taste the turmeric in their turmeric capsules, right? And so they don't know where it's from and this and that. So this is, in the short term, I think that's the one thing, is to open up people's eyes to understanding that there is a huge difference in what you're eating, everything you're eating, from the vegetables and the fruits and the supplements and herbs, dependent on the terroir and where it's from. So that's kind of like our next mission, is to sort of open that up. And I think again, wine is just a great way of it's a good example.
I think you're doing some great work. Thank you very much. If anyone wants to read more, dig a little deeper,
so HANAH Life, HANAH life.com. is a good starting point.
That's the website.
Yeah.
And we'll put that in the show notes for this podcast, which is at LLAMApodcast.com. That's LLAMA, Live Long and Master Aging, LLAMA podcast.com. And again, Joel, really good to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the work you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Health optimization is what this podcast is all about, and that means taking care of our mitochondria, the energy centres of our cells. Physical strength, avoiding frailty, is key, and that's why the science behind urolithin A and the work of Timeline Nutrition is so interesting. You can find out more and get a discount code at our website and in the show notes for this episode.